begin the Public Safety, Health, and Welfare Committee meeting this evening at 7:01 p.m. Present are committee members Williamson, Madden, and Glassburn, council members Gilchrist, Limper, Heeman, Sparrow, our council president, special assistants mayor, our rec and safety directors, and guests. On the agenda is resolution number 2022-3, which is a resolution authorizing the mayor to enter into a contract with Motorola to purchase 50 Motorola WatchGuard body cameras together with related technical assistance for deployment by the North Olmsted Division of Police at a cost of $139,569 through the state purchase program and funded through grant funds from the Ohio Office of Criminal Justice Services and declaring an emergency. Director Schofield is here and she will speak to this resolution.
Yes, Madam Chair, thank you. As noted, this is an opportunity through the Ohio Office of Criminal Justice Services for North Olmsted Division of Police to launch their body-worn camera program. This is a grant in the amount of $139,569. There's no match required for this. So this will allow us to procure 50 cameras. So we'll cover each of our officers, patrol, detective bureau, everyone will have their own. There will be no need to share, which is helpful. Just a little point, about 47% of all law enforcement agencies with under 100 officers have adopted a body-worn camera program nationwide. So we will be joining that group. We have, as part of this program and as a requirement for the grant, we established a new internal policy for body-worn cameras using Lexipol best practices, and Lexipol, some of you may know, provides a range of informational, technological, training, education, wellness resources to public safety agencies. And so we take advantage of all of those resources. So to go with that, the body-worn camera program has many benefits, and the particular program that we're going to use through Motorola Solutions will allow our police to integrate camera evidence into their regular training, which is important to improve officer performance. It will also allow us to analyze use of force beyond just our policy compliance, but be able to learn from that. We'll be able to establish benchmarks and turn that evidence footage into data points so that we'll be able to track information and use that as a learning opportunity for our officers. But I think with all that even said, I think it's a real opportunity for us to improve the understanding between police and community relations and how we interact with each other. So that's very important. Just as part of this program, we will have some upfront technical assistance from Motorola for the cameras when we get them. That will include training. We'll have related hardware such as all the battery packs and all those things needed to keep them working. The package also comes with redacted video and audio redaction software, which is very, very important because this will allow them to very easily redact information that they need to keep private if it's confidential or sensitive. This could include face detection, intuitive object tracking, where they'll be able to pick up items such as not only people, but let's say vehicles or license plates or other small objects. This will allow them to do some selective audio muting so that they can take out distracting noises or bystander conversations that might be picked up otherwise, so they'll be able to screen that out. And then this will also allow police to better prepare and comply with public records requests because the evidence is there and it's stored and we'll have access to it more easily. We'll have an evidence library, which is a software package that simplifies and automates data maintenance. We'll have video evidence management software that will allow us to streamline the evidence review process and to automatically maintain that stored data. We already have a server, we didn't have to procure an additional server to store all of this information. It will also make it easier for us to share evidence between agencies, because we can export data, download it, and we can search the data for various criteria that we select. And then lastly, it provides device management, because we'll be able to track each camera and its use, and it will allow for faster shift changes because they don't have to swap out with each other. They'll each have their own camera.
Director, do we know, I know you said there's a server, but how does this information, or how do these videos get uploaded to the server? Is it manual, or is it automatic when the police come back on station, and it just kind of like automatically goes to a cloud once they hit our wireless system?
Correct. Yeah, it can automatically download or upload to the server for storage.
Okay.
And that's part of the software package that allows them to easily kind of offload all of that information from their shift and get it stored.
Okay. Is there any kind of, like a max number or a max amount of video that they can have on their body cam at one time, like throughout the day, if they go on multiple calls and they don't check in here?
No, from what I understand, it can maintain quite a few hours of video.
Okay.
And they work 12-hour shifts, so ideally there's plenty of space for them to come in, download it, and then get it ready for their next shift.
Okay. But is it going onto a server, or is it going to be a cloud-based
server? It's server-based.
But there's a backup for that server,
Yep.
right? So
correct.
Okay.
So we didn't need to buy an additional one.
Okay, as long as there's backup somewhere that we catch it in case something happens to.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you. Any other questions from the committee? Council.
Yes, Madam Chair. So where they're paying for it, it's a zero cost to us grant. What's the life expectancy of a camera, and then are we responsible for replacing cameras in the future?
This package, the gold standard of this package would have come with an automatic 3-year replacement. In working with Sergeant Fiorito, who is our technical guru at the over at police, he says these will last well beyond 3 years. But after that, yes, we'll be responsible for replacing them over time.
Yeah, I would ask that we get with the finance director and start figuring out what that cost would be in the future, and figure out whether we expect to do what's the replacement plan on that? Are we gonna do a few at a time per year, or does it have to be a bulk transfer to new cameras? I'm just interested in that from a cost perspective.
They run between $1,000 and $1,200 each.
Okay.
And we'll have this group of 50 for several years. So quite frankly, I imagine the technology will change again by the time we be ready to replace them. But I think this is a critical investment for police to get their body-worn camera program up and running. And it could well be that even though technology is progressing, the cost of them could come down because more and more police agencies are using them. So there's kind of, there's value in more and more of these cameras being bought, where it starts to reduce the price.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think it's a great program. I just wanna make sure that we're understanding what it's gonna cost in the future, and that we plan for it, or that we know it's gonna be a one-time cost for that budget year, so the finance director has an idea of how to budget for that.
Correct. And we will do that, and we'll keep an eye on that, and in the budget, at least the temporary budget, you've approved an IT person for police, and in addition to maintaining the dispatch technology, they'll also be handling this part of the technology for the division as well.
So you had mentioned a gold package that would automatically replace them in 3 years.
Yes.
How much more was that package?
About $48,000.
And that would just, is it a one-time replacement after the 3 years, or could that time be negotiated with Motorola just to kind of anticipate 5-year replacement?
I think that's what we would look at, is we wanna look to start replacing these for at least 5 years. Sergeant Fiorito is confident that the technology will last for 5 years.
Yeah, but what about the cost? If we're locked in at a 48,000, I guess, I don't know. I mean,
Yeah, it's
anticipating, cause it could go up in 5
Yeah,
years,
yeah,
kinda
it's
like,
interesting to think about, what
Mhm.
do we think on that? What's the trend, like, has the cost been going down per year on these, or?
They have been getting less expensive over time, as more and more agencies purchase them.
Okay.
Are they on all the time, or do they have to turn them on, or?
They turn them on, there's a little button, where they can turn them on and turn them off.
Okay.
Like if when they go off shift, they're off. Imagine when they, take a break, they'll turn them off. But there is a button that they can use to turn them on and off. And there's ways that they can manipulate the camera as when they're out in the field to pick up certain items. It's really interesting technology.
Will they also have something on them, so like maybe we know where they're at in the community, so maybe there's something going on Columbia and they know this officer is there so that they could send them on?
Well, that would come through dispatch, regardless.
Mm-hmm.
If you're asking, is there like GPS tracking
Yeah,
within the
yeah.
camera? I'd have to double check on that for you, but I can ask in the morning.
Just curious.
but the vehicles are equipped with GPS, so it would be.
Oh,
Yeah.
their car's
okay, they are,
so,
yeah.
I didn't know that, okay.
Yeah. Mr. Scrum.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Right?
Director, is there a set of standards on how they'll be used and what's the protocol for them to be used? Or is this gonna be for anything while they're on shift or?
Well, we adopted Lexipol's policy for body-worn camera programs. We can set criteria for things that we wanna look for in particular. But it is my understanding in talking with the chief and Sergeant Fiorito is that these will be on during their 12-hour shifts and they'll pick up their activity when they're on duty. But the policy lays out very clearly in its policy that the state of Ohio accepted and approved about how use of body-worn cameras and that evidence gets integrated into the regular daily police practice.
Is there any way that we can get a copy of that policy? Or
Sure,
I'd
absolutely.
like to see that policy, please.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Explain about the software. My question about that is, so the equipment itself is gonna last like 3 years. We have the technical assistance software uploading all of that for how long, and or when do we purchase it again, or when do we upgrade it? How long is that, you know what I mean, is it a year technology, is it a 2-year?
Well, this package includes 2 years of subscription renewal for the software. So that gets us, 3 years of the software use as part of this purchase. And then years up.
A subsequent 2-year renewal, so it's renewed annually, it's renewed after 2 years, and
This first package will be renewed after 2 years.
we know the cost of the renewal.
The latest quote. Is going out $18,530 a year.
Yes, so after 2 years, we need that in the budget, plus then a potential replacement program to make sure that we will have an extra if it breaks, another camera or two, yeah, okay.
Yeah, and the 50 we have now gives us a small buffer in the number of cameras. If something does break,
Okay,
we
good,
do have, because we don't have 50 sworn officers at this time.
okay.
And the chief and the captain don't necessarily need to have cameras either.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. So if we were to, just say we were to get onto the program, the replacement program, would that 18,000 be figured into the price of new cameras?
No, that's the annual subscription for the software.
But that's after our 2-year program, or our 2-year, benefit to getting the cameras,
Correct.
right? So with each new purchase, if we purchase 50 more in 3 years, would we get 2 years free?
If that's what we wanted in the quote, yes.
So then it would almost make sense to replace, because then we're spending 50,000 anyway to replace, but then we have to pay 18,000 a year for the subscription. But if we went into the upgrade program in 3 or 5, then the cost would be fixed into that purchase. Do you know what I mean? So right now, we're doing the 50 cameras, we get 2 years of the technical, or the technical assistance and
And
everything
the
else.
software.
Right, so after the 2 years, we have to pay 18,000 a year for that.
Yes, for that subscription.
So if we purchase new cameras through that gold program that you had mentioned earlier, so let's just say maybe we did that in 4 years, then in replacing all of the cameras, we would, instead of spending $36,000 on software for 2 years, we would technically only be paying out, 12, or I'm sorry, she said it's what, about 2,000 per camera? I'm just trying to see the benefit.
It's $1,000 in our quote that we're working on right now, it's $995 per camera.
Okay, so then what is all of the other, what is the other 100,000 or 80,000
It's
for?
It's the camera, it's warranties, it's the battery packs for each one, there's a transfer station, they have in-car Wi-Fi,
Got it.
the remote development training, the software, the redactive software,
Okay,
and maintenance for that.
okay. All right, thank you. Any other questions?
Yeah, just clarifying that. So those are additional costs in addition to the software packages. There's also like, other hardware on the cameras. that we're gonna have to
Well, the
replace?
hardware is mostly just like battery packs, and
Okay.
it's mostly software driven.
Okay,
But once we get this, these would not renew every year. These are upfront investments in the software packages, and then we just subscribe to that service in out years.
Any other questions? Let the record reflect that the mayor, our service director, and our economic development director are present. All right, seeing that there are no other questions, I would like to make a motion to recommend approval of resolution 2023-3 and ask for second.
Technically, our vice chair would say.
Second by Councilman Mann, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Motion passes with a vote of 3-0, and our meeting concludes at 7:19 p.m. Thank you.
I'd like to call the Recreation, Public Parks and Buildings meeting to order at 7:19 p.m. Present are committee members, Heeman, Lindbergh, Scarl. Also present in our meeting are Council President Broussard, Council members Gilchrist, Glassburn, Madden, Williamson, the mayor, the Economic Development Director, the Safety Director, Service Director, Recreation Director, and the Special Assistant to the mayor. On the agenda is 2023-8, an ordinance amending and restating section 957.01 of chapter 957, parentheses, alcoholic beverages on public grounds, and parentheses, of the codified ordinances of the city of North Olmsted in order to permit beer and wine to be sold and consumed at the quote Saturday in the Park concert series, end quote, and declaring an emergency. This is, Director, would you like to?
Sure. Thank you, Madam Chair. The ordinance that you have before you is to, as it states, to prevent beer and wine and our concert series that we are implementing this year in 2023. The concert series start on June 10th, and they conclude on August 12th, and there are 5 of them. This is in cooperation with our safety service director, Jennifer Schofield, and the police and safety forces, that we will provide security, also provide an enclosed area for the alcohol beverages to be consumed. We are still working out some of the details on the actual events themselves as far as the date of events. So, but I did want to present this for you to get a good look at this.
Thank you, Director. We have a lot of questions, so I do anyway. I did speak with the director earlier about this because I did have a lot of questions. So fundamentally, it's a program where, you know, currently at our homecoming, right, we have the VFW, they have their beer tent, they're responsible for really everything. They cordon the area off and they just sort of take care of it, right? It's their event, and we've always, for several years now, let them have that at an event. So this is similar to that in that, you know, the event is the anchor to the ability to have the, you know, beer and wine sales. They're individual pours, from what I understand, so nothing is going to be like free pour, whatever. It's looking to have groups, for example, that would participate with us. So perhaps like maybe the Arts Commission would, kind of like we do the fish fry now, right, where a group comes and they want to participate. So they would have a percentage of that proceeds, but we just don't know what the percentage is yet. We don't know what the groups are yet. And so there's just some things to figure out, but I think it's a good program overall because, you know, we do want to have events. Other cities do it, Berea and some others, and they do it successfully. So with that, I will open questions to the committee. Mr. Scrum.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Director Pinchek, it's 5 Saturdays, or 5 Fridays? We don't
5
know.
Saturdays.
5 Saturdays. So to have the different groups, is it gonna be like a different group, one group per Saturday, or is it multiple groups on each?
Depending on the venue itself, for instance, the very last concert on August 12th, we're expecting thousands and thousands of people to come to our city and watch the event. So we would target at least 2 different groups to work the sales of the alcoholic beverages. Some of the other concerts we're not anticipating as such of a crowd, so it would probably just be one group into those areas. As Madam Chair has already stated, we're looking at some of the groups that are local in our area, from Friends of Parks and Recreation to maybe the Arts Commission to maybe a booster group or 2, you know, whatever that looks like.
And for the percentage of what they're gonna make, we're gonna make, is the city up front and the money first?
We are.
And then who's gonna decide on the percentages of who's getting what?
That's something we'll discuss as an administration.
And it'll be cans, I'm sure, no bottles.
Can.
Plastic bottles of the wine?
Correct.
Little individual ones?
Similar facilities that hold these, as Madam Chair mentioned, over in Berea and Cold Lake. They have a very successful concert in the park. It's beer cans or bottles, wine cans, and seltzer cans. So no open pours of any kind. Correct.
Okay. Thank you.
Anybody else?
Thank you, Madam Chair. So how much of the park is gonna be taken up by the event? You know, typically when we have these, it's like with the homecoming, the whole park is focused on the festivities. Like there gonna be field usage going on at the same time for baseball, softball fields?
Great question. Not during the event. So we would schedule events prior to or the day before, the day after. We do not want anything to conflict with our kids' activities or adult activities, as well as the concert series. Concert series is going to happen in the gazebo on the southern portion of the park, similar to that we had Party in the Park last year in the fall, where we had a Pet the Cougar that came. We're expecting a larger turnout, of course, and a larger enclosed area than what the beer tent was prior. So.
Yeah, so again, the event, you know, is the anchor, and there are the co-events.
Yeah, I think that's important. Important delineation here on park
Absolutely.
events here that we don't really wanna push beyond is that
This event is
the event
separate
is
by itself.
basically taking the park and
Correct.
it's, thank you.
Yes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Director, are people going to be able to freely walk around the park with their beverages, or are they gonna be
Enclosed.
enclosed, so they stay within that, and
Correct.
they'll have someone monitoring?
Very similar to other venues that I mentioned. They enclose a very large portion of the park. They create pinch points for entrance and exit. Booths set up there inside the event that sell alcoholic beverages and working with the security forces, they'll be monitoring the situation as well. Yeah, so it would all be enclosed.
Thank you.
Any more questions? I would like, I think, to hold this in committee pending, some of the information with regard to perhaps a specific, a more narrow list of groups that we would partner with, what percentage we might want to split with that. We have to have this completed by the end of February, and I think that we could get, in speaking with the director from the administration, we could get a little bit more defined information within a week, so that it wouldn't hold this up at all, because we need time to, process the legislation and get the liquor permits, because I do think it's a good program. I just would want to know more about, the percentage splits, the overall cost, and then a little bit more of the detail of how it will be implemented before we pass that. So at this time, I'd like to make a recommendation to hold this in committee pending these certain answers to certain questions that we have asked, and ask for a second.
Second.
All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Thank you. Motion passes 3-0. We'll hold this in committee, and we'll be setting another meeting, I would think, within a week. And I will close the meeting at 7:28 p.m.
Would you like me to start? Please. So I will call to order the Streets and Transportation Committee at 7:28 on January 24th. Present are all of council, including committee members Gilchrist, Glassman, and Madden, Mayor, and the directors of Economic Development, Safety Service, Recreation, and the Special Assistant to the Mayor. Streets and Transportation has two pieces of legislation on the agenda. First of which is 2023-4, a contract with the Senior Transportation Connection. Who would like to speak on this item? Mr. Pinchak.
Thank you, Councilman. I'm passing out before you just a little bit easier version of what the price increase looks like. I had our administrator at the senior center provide us with this as well as we walk through the contract. So our contract with STC has gone up this year, but we have budgeted for this increase. So as you can see on the top, our current fares each way have gone up, a couple dollars to $7 to $5, but we offset that cost with our current prices and the proposed prices for each of our riders. STC is our leader in our transportation for our seniors. We do have other options that we can pursue, one of which taking everything in-house, which would take us a long time, a large amount of money by purchasing our own vans, operating our own dispatch, hiring more staff. There is another program out there that is RTA Parent Transport. They are available, but they are not reliable from our experience in the past. So we are recommending that we stay with STC. If the budget, we feel that if the budget with the increased budget that we have, if we still feel that we need to cut costs, we will limit the rides for this year as well with our seniors. We have been informed by STC that they are hiring lobbyists, or they have hired lobbyists to help reduce the cost of this for this year. So we are confident and hopeful that our partners over at STC will reduce our costs sometime this year. So in front of you is the breakdown of some of these costs.
Okay, are there questions from committee on this? Ms. Gilchrist.
I have a question. I'm looking here at the proposed and current within North Olmsted medical personnel and outside. It looks like they're gonna charge more money for within than without.
That
It seems so weird.
it was an increase that we were not expecting,
Uh-huh.
but if you look below though, within our residents, we increased it by $2.50 to offset some of those costs as well. So we are trying to be as fair as possible to our residents so that they don't have to pay as much. That we will have to incur a little bit more, but as I mentioned, we are very hopeful that STC comes back to us sometime this year and reduce those costs.
Okay. Thank you.
Sure. Director, what on this term sheet is elected decisions by us, and what are our agreements that, you know, is all this take it or leave it in terms of a full agreement with Senior Transportation Connection, or do we have the choice to change any of these, or what's?
We honestly, we don't have a large amount of flexibility with STC. These are some of the same figures that they're charging different cities as well. The current rates we are under right now, so the $9.50 to $21, but those are going to expire at the end of February. So we are going to have to search for other transportation means. If we don't choose this, then we have to go to RTA Transport, which is a little bit cheaper, to be honest with you, but it is very unreliable. So based on past experience that our administrator has talked about, as well as some of the comments that I've received from some of the members who used it.
Director, you mentioned that there's the possibility that some of these costs may decrease or level off in the future. What is the timeline that STC is circulating on that?
They were hopeful that it would be in the second to third quarter. That's what we, fall by fall, which doesn't give us a whole lot of relief this year. I understand. If we do reach our budget limits that we have, we are pretty confident that we can reduce the ride share that we have and still, push our seniors to other transportation means if necessary.
What are the budget? What are we spending on this?
I honestly I can't tell you tonight, but I can get back to you on that for sure. I don't have that figure with me.
I guess the curiosity that raises in my mind is if that we're anticipating that some of these increases are temporary, is it worthwhile for the city or this council to consider subsidizing that temporary increase to have a level cost structure? But I know that's probably a more complicated question than I just asked.
Agreed. My recommendation is to use STC with the great relationship that we've had in the past. They've been pretty open and honest with us in the past and what their intentions have been. I don't have this, and again, I wasn't here last year, but this is what has been reported to me, and our relationship has been very good. So I don't anticipate the relationship declining to such a degree that we will have to jump ship, if that makes sense.
Speaking for myself, I'm heard and seen great things about STC as a service provider. I guess the curiosity is if the city was to budget additional funds for this, to what would those be? What does that? How far can we get with that? Is that
Sure.
worth reviewing, looking at? Again, to provide a more level pricing structure. I'm not suggesting not using STC, but understanding that better would be helpful in my view. What is the timeline for this agreement needing to take shape?
So our fees, we're locked in until the end of February, right now on the current fees. And then we have to make a determination at that point.
If we continue with it, if we approve this agreement with STC, what is our flexibility internally in terms of timelines for the fees that our residents would pay to participate as riders?
Well, we set those fees,
Right.
so we can adjust accordingly as needed. I just don't wanna make it unaffordable for our seniors who are on fixed income to be able to use our transportation. So an increase of $1.25 to $2 is not much, but when you, within North Olmsted, because their fees increased as much as they did, we're doubling our fee going from $2.50 to $5 to try to offset some of that cost. So I know that's a lot, but when we look at the $7 increase, we're trying to offset that as well.
I guess what I'm partially driving at, and then I will get to other council members, is approving or disapproving this specific agreement is potentially a separate consideration of anything that we would do to, again, either subsidize or level off the increases to the riders, because we could electively do that on our own timeline with our own rates that we provide
Sure.
to residents. That doesn't need to necessarily hold up this legislation specific, right? Is that a correct understanding?
Correct.
Any questions from committee? Let's go, Chris.
I have another question here. The North Olmsted Senior Center, for them to go there, it's $2. If they're going to the rec center, would that be $5 then? Or would it, like if they're doing silver sneakers or something, it would be?
It would be, unfortunately. And if you, there's another, it's 5 riders, it's all based on 5 riders, so $60 is like the price that we get for $12 per person. Anything over 5 riders is an additional 12. So, we're hoping that we can get 5 riders at every time, so it lowers the cost for our participants.
Okay.
And we have in the past, so it's very popular.
Yes, you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Having been the chairperson of a committee that reviewed this in the past, they have been more than fair, and they really didn't raise their rates over the past probably 6 years, except for minimally, and I think it was only once that they did. So yes, I do agree with the chair that we like the relationship with them. And if we knew more about the ridership and where they go, how many and where they go, then we could, as the chair is suggesting, look at our budget to put toward our seniors to say, you know what, your rate is really just gonna still be this because we want to give that to you. So perhaps you might be right in saying, like, do this because we have to do the contract by the end of February, but then look into and investigate the ridership, where they go, and then what our budget could allow for making the North Olmsted seniors be equal to what they are now, or even a more slight increase, if that's what you're suggesting.
Yeah, I'm not suggesting zero increase at all. What I'm suggesting is, and I'm just gonna throw numbers out in the air, for example, if the within North Olmsted, which is currently $2.50, would be $4 instead of $5, based on the more optimistic outlook for STC, then we might be better served to only raise to 4 and us temporarily pay the extra dollar at least through the end of the year. And if it doesn't come through, then we're at $4 for this year and then go to 5 the following year. As opposed to going 5 and then 4. And so, Mr. Scarlett.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Director Finchek, is there any way to get rough numbers maybe on how many of our residents use that monthly?
Yes, I think that's right.
I'd like to see what we're dealing with. You know, if we have $1 per 50 riders a month or 100 riders, we know it's, you know, whatever, so we can put that number with $1 a month.
I'll have to see by month.
Thank you. Thank you.
President Broussard.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Director, can you explain the relationship between our partner community? How does that work?
So our partner community, I knew you were gonna ask this.
Oh, sorry.
You know, I don't have a good answer for you.
Okay.
And I apologize, I should have
I
had
appreciate your candor.
Tiffany Hunt, who was administrators, to this whole program, who I told her did not have to come tonight, which probably would have been a better idea if I would have asked her to come tonight, so, but I will get that answer for you.
Thank you.
Sure.
Are there additional questions from council on this topic? Okay, so, I think I know the answer, but I'm gonna ask again just to make sure. If this legislation proceeds, there's nothing about it, us doing so, that would prohibit us from continuing to review whether we wanted to subsidize through the end of the year any portion of the increases. Okay. Would we need to come back with a second piece of legislation to do that, or would that just be beyond the appropriation of funds? Madam Mayor.
Mr. Chair, that would be a question that we would need to direct to Director Giroux. In the whereas clause, I know that it delineates right here, you know, sort of what each trip and cost and all that stuff. So, but I would agree that I would ask council to err on the side of caution and move forward with this contract so that at least our senior residents have something in place. And that obviously if we need to prepare legislation then to come back to you, we will do so. But again, that would be a question for Director Giroux that I would feel more comfortable having him give that answer to council, which we will ask him to do.
Ms. Hewitt?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We, put it through now and then, if we get the information soon.
Well, precisely what I was considering is that, that on a procedural basis, if we move this forward, we can amend it on third reading on the floor. That will allow for the legislation to move on a timeline, so it's still on a trajectory to pass when rates expire in February, or at the end of February. What are other thoughts? Or any other questions or comments from committee? I'm sorry.
Just reinforce Mr. Scarles, if we can get some numbers, that will really help us kind of know how many people are using the senior center and within.
Still get those for by tomorrow.
It's noted in the notes on the one pager that the director provided us, that's what I'm gonna say, but it's, the service that's provided by this is not, typically just a person wants a ride from here to there. This is not something suited for Uber or Lyft, or other things, so, this is a good service. Any further questions or comments? Ms. Gilchrist?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think this is a great thing that we have for our residents, and I'm thinking that it's good that we're addressing this now for them so that they can continue to get the services that they need to.
Sorry, Ms. Seaman?
Thank you. When you're gonna break down the ridership information, could you also look at the from and to destinations? Because the curiosity would also be like how many folks at St. Richard's are in that, not just the number of riders, but from one group, you know, all going shopping, or from Joshua Tree, or like all the different facilities, and more senior living spaces that we have at Italia. And is there a break in price that could be given for a group? Because I know that they usually go like Tuesday, they'll do this grocery store, that, the other. And so perhaps that's a different way to offer a break is, you know, Italia these days, it's this price. On another day, it might be a different price because only 2 people want to go. So consolidation. Thank you.
Mr. Scarl?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, I just want to echo Councilwoman Gilchrist and Councilwoman Beeman and everyone. Basically, this is a great program, and I'm in favor of trying to subsidize this and help these residents the most we can. Come up with, however, we got to come up with something to help them offset this increase. Thank you.
So as is the case with RTA and virtually all forms of transportation, just so that everyone understands it, it's every ride is subsidized on some level. None of the rides that are provided in this cost structure that's proposed or was previously or will be is a market rate that would cover the costs of the service provided. So what we're really discussing is how much of a subsidy we provide on these things. So, any other comments or questions? Okay, so I would move to favorably recommend to all of council and look forward to potential amendments to legislation and more information, and ask for a second.
Second.
Seconded by Ms. Gilchrist. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Okay, so that's recommended 3-0. And our second item on the agenda is 2023-7 ODOT bridge repair. And looks like Director Optum has some nice colorful images to share.
Apologies to the chairman and all members of council, this was included in your packet. What I'm passing around are conceptual in nature, not for construction, but the end product will look substantially similar to what you're seeing today. The legislation before you contemplates the partnership between the city and the Ohio Department of Transportation for purposes of carrying out the bridge repairs. There are two bridges included, one of which is the Great Northern Bridge, which is the subject of the photos and the conceptual engineered renderings that you see in front of you. This project will allow us to enter into the agreement to eventually repair parapets, facades, fencing on both the bridges. The Great Northern Bridge, obviously getting a little bit more of a facelift than the Clay Bridge. That really is the crux of the legislation. This is just supplemental, so everyone sees kind of what we're driving towards. We did a poll with I think 4 or 5 different sketches last spring. This particular rendering was overwhelmingly favored by the residents that took the poll. There was well over 100 respondents, which is a pretty good feedback for a flash poll that was up for a number of days. Happy to answer any questions with respect to the legislation.
Any questions from committee? We're all mesmerized by the pattern of the fencing.
So that material is actually going to be one-of-a-kind fabricated steel fencing. It's going to be powder coated and then painted so that what you see now is that rust that kind of bleeds onto the concrete parapet. That won't happen with the coating and the painting that's going to happen to this particular fencing. It's going to be fabricated from a shop floor, so it's not something that you're going to be able to buy off the rack. It's a unique gateway piece for us.
Mr. Scarl.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Two questions, Director. The name plate, no dome set, will that be lit up separately?
All of the existing lighting is to remain, so on some of the further subsequent pages, you can see the projected, I think you're one page off.
Short answer is
The
yes.
nighttime light, right?
Yeah.
On your back page. So that is how that looks.
It's lighting beneath on each of them.
Yep, okay, and then, the way that it's spelled out, what's the reason that the N's not over the O, or the M? I mean, is that something that they typically do?
So we
I mean,
we hired a
just
design
seems-
engineer.
Yeah, it just seems weird to me, I'm not used to being
It's hurts.
like this, like.
It's a right margin, not a left.
Yeah.
When you're driving at 65 plus and.
It'll actually, your brain will reorganize it, so, no, I can't speak to why so we put out an RFP to get a design engineer, which is different from an engineer that kind of tells you how to build things. This particular engineer, our Apex Engineering out of Florida, all they do is design bridges, right? And so that is, I guess, in keeping with the design trends. I don't know why they justified it that way, one way or the other. The one thing that I do really like is if you look at the fencing itself, it goes from low to high, and the high point actually is at the point where you would be getting off the highway to come into the city, so you'd be following golf course. I think it's a really interesting feature.
I don't know, I'd like to see the north, the N over the L and have it centered, so the O and the T are by itself, but that's just. You have to ask an art student in high school, what do you think of that one?
It just adds the uniqueness, Council.
I guess.
I'm trying to hide the O and L.
There's always one.
There is, right?
I'm hiding the O and the L, and I can see what they're talking about.
Ms. Williamson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Director, do we know if the grass or the greenery around that area would be obstructing view of the north side? We know that sometimes ODOT doesn't timely take care of it.
No, we will implore upon ODOT. The mayor, myself, and Director Carney, and the special assistant Massarola had a very good meeting with all of ODOT District 12 leadership. We have the District 12 deputy director's cell phone number, so I'm sure if our new gateway sign is obstructed by ODOT's weeds, that we will have the mayor make a phone call to the district director and we'll take care of it. So.
Just making sure. Thank you.
She's not wrong. I'll put the weed whip in the back of my.
We have plenty everywhere, we can take care of it.
We'll borrow one of Kevin from the service garage.
Could be a union, yeah, you don't have to do that.
Union.
So I'm trying to not ask this in a way that comes off as a joke.
I was serious, unfortunately.
I think that trade's left the station.
So currently there's signage that, because there's the second off ramp that goes south on Great Northern to Olmsted Township. Is that, are there any changes or anything else we're anticipating in regards to that signage or where that signage is located?
None of that changes with this ODOT project. It's strictly the fencing, the parapet, and the bridge itself.
Okay. Ms. Williamson?
None of those directional signs will be on this bridge though.
Like
Like
affixed
those
to the
big
bridge.
green signs with the,
Like affixed to the bridge
yeah,
itself.
nothing, okay.
We wouldn't be spraying for a bridge of this magnitude to allow things like that to be off.
I'm just making sure. You never know.
Fair questions.
Have we? I'm not gonna ask. Okay. Are there any further questions or comments on this legislation?
Yes. Cause I know there's people that think,
I keep coming back to, have we asked or have we given any consideration to Olmsted Township's view of this at all?
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
No?
Okay.
Very good. What she
Any other questions, comments? Miss Seaman?
Thank you. You know, these are pretty commonplace now, no matter where you go, you're driving through Akron, it says Akron, you're driving through Canton, they've got their, even on their, sound barrier walls, they've got their logos, Independence. So I think it's very attractive, and I think it's kind of just updating us to, you know, what is kind of the status quo in other places. Or what has been for a while. Thank you.
Okay. Mr. Lambert?
I mean, just one other comment, I mean, with all these, sound barriers coming up and things like that, there's a little bit extra benefit too for people to kind of understand where they're at location wise and there is something to be said of just, getting people excited to come into your town. I know some people might not agree with that, but there's certainly a benefit to presenting well on the highway.
President Broussard?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just kind of piggybacking on what Councilwoman Williamson asked, but really not so much about the signs being obscured, but more along the lines of, can we get a higher level of landscaping appearance? You know, if you drive down 71, I feel like Strongsville's entrances are kind of the gold standard. They're meticulously maintained, and ours are not. So,
Mr. Chairman?
Madam Mayor?
That would be, something for council to consider, when you're discussing the budget. Those are privately, that was funded not by ODOT, but by, the city themselves. So that would be something that, council would need to discuss during a conversation they would have about those entrances.
There have been communities, you know, Westlake has these kinds of things on 90 and they're not maintained so well. You know, and that community definitely has the means to do that if they were inclined to do that. So my concern is whatever we put, that it's maintainable and within the affordability and reasonability of that scope. Mr. Lumber?
Yeah, that was gonna be my follow-up question, so Mr. Upton, we're gonna have to take on responsibility now for the fencing, right? That's gonna be added, and like you said, the maintenance is gonna be reduced because of the materials,
The
but
way in which it's fabricated, the powder coating, and the way in which it's painted.
but ultimately ODOT's abdicating then responsibility of the fencing at this point, but they would still be responsible for maintaining the bridge,
Yes. I mean,
bridge component.
yes.
Maintenance,
So
et
the fence itself, we had the option to just replace what's there, right? Take a chain link fence down, put a brand new chain link fence up. We've seen that movie before because the bridge, it looks horrendous right now. It's just the rust is, you know, rotted the parapet wall, the whole 9 yards. So ODOT still is responsible for maintaining the bridge. It's their bridge, it's not ours, right? Or to a certain extent.
For painting and coating and stuff with the.
For now, they're not gonna come and repaint a section of that fencing if it
No,
happens to rust.
But the wall chips, things broken, that's all still part of ODOT's.
Yeah, nothing materially changes their scope of responsibility. This is just a nice looking fence. My,
Ms. Williams?
Last question, from me, I think. Director, the outer wedge of this bridge, there's not like a big, I guess someone could walk on that side of it? Is the fencing portion gonna be flush with the cement?
I haven't seen the final shop drawings, but I would venture to say that there's not gonna be a large approach.
Where people could, just to make sure.
Yeah,
just as a safety standpoint.
would be, I don't foresee that.
Okay.
Because if you look on, that's just a 3D
This is the-
rendered image,
Yeah,
but it
it's
looks
the
like
walkway.
it's flush with the actual parapet wall itself.
Okay. Yeah, it looks like from here, there's a little bit of a ledge. And I don't know if that's
yeah.
shadow, but
Yeah, that's,
just check on
yeah,
that.
that's just I will, but that photo is just conceptual in nature to understand kind of what it's gonna look like.
Thank you.
Any further comments, questions on this legislation? Okay, seeing none, I would move to favorably recommend ordinance 2023-7 and ask for a second.
Second.
Moved by Ms. Gilchrist, all those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
And that is 3-0, and we will conclude streets and transportation at 8:02.
I would like to begin the Intra-Governmental Relations Committee at 8:02 p.m. Council President Broussard, committee members Gilchrist, Keenan, and Scarrow, council members Glassburn, Madden, Lambert, and Williamson, guests, the mayor, economic director, safety director, service director, recreation director, and special assistant to the mayor. The purpose of this evening's meeting is to discuss the changes to the precincts set by the Board of Elections in response to the ward changes approved in 2022. Director Perlatti of the Board of Elections stated that after ward changes, the Board of Elections must then realign the precincts with the wards to ensure the precincts follow their guidelines as well, wherein precincts cannot pass through ward boundaries, ensuring the precincts do not have more than 1,400 electors, etc. The Board of Election wants to ensure there are no questions or issues before the final approval with their board. Lastly, the Board of Elections will be sending out literature to those affected by the changes. Are there any questions from committee? Yes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. All right, so these are precincts only, precinct changes only,
Yes.
based on the previously approved ward map.
Yes.
Okay, and I did wanna know, approximately how many voters, right, would be changing voting locations? And I don't know if we know the answer to that, and the only reason I'm asking is because, like in Ward 4, Butternut School closed, Horizon closed, and these folks were changing all the time, and I get a lot of calls about where do I vote now, even though they get postcards, even though they can go to the website, what do we anticipate, that change is gonna be for these voters, and what is gonna happen about true notified, and they get postcards, what happens from the Board of Elections?
The Board of Elections is going to send out literature to everyone who's affected. So we have to wait for the literature. We can call the Board of Elections, we can't call the Board of Elections and find out that information for you. But we don't have that information right now. Unless someone else can answer that question for me.
Madam Chair, I can partially answer. I can give at least some information for an educated guess. So the numbers on the second page of this that has the Plan A, the proposed plan that shows the precincts. The numbers you see in each of the precincts are the number of voters in that precinct, not the population. But when we did this, approximately, if I'm recalling correctly, 17% of the city changed wards. Now, that does not necessarily mean they will change voting locations. So, for example, on the far west end of the city, in the northern corner, there's the new precinct 1D. My guess, although we don't have this information on here, is that 1D would still vote at St. Clair. And that area changed ward, but probably won't change voting location. Now, there's going to be the reverse, where same ward, but perhaps a different voting location. A lot of the changes were more on the eastern end of the city. In general, it appears, to my eyes, that the Board of Elections has tried to do the least amount of change to the precincts possible. And that has the benefit of more voters being in the same precinct or with the same people in a precinct as before. But it has the disadvantage of it's drawing boundaries to facilitate a map that doesn't exist anymore. And that's why you see some irregularities in this. In the northeast corner, 2E is a very unusual shape. This orange in the middle here. What they're trying to do there is to keep 2D and 2C the same because they can. If you brought down the western border of 2D to Lorraine Road and went down Walter Road, you could have, if everyone can see here, 2C here, 2D, and 2E as much more compact shapes, but that would move people that don't have to be moved within precincts. But that doesn't necessarily mean they change where they vote. If this body has well, let me stop there, and are there any questions or comments on what I just said?
Well,
I'm not the chair.
Do you have another question?
I have one.
You have a
We
lot
can
of
go through them one at a time.
Sure.
So, these maps were drawn by the Board of Elections?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. What does this impact then do about changing, just if you have ward people, you have precinct people, things like that in that structure? How do those seats change?
There are the same number of precincts in the city as there were before. 3B in the lower southwest corner of the city will stay the way that it is because that portion of North Olmsted is in the Olmsted Falls School District, so that will always be like that unless the city annexes additional properties. But in general, the precincts are used for two main purposes. One is that it's to define where people vote. Because an entire precinct, not part of a precinct votes here and part votes there, it's the entire precinct. So there is a compelling interest for us or the Board of Elections to make these precincts compact, because if you have a situation like this 2E, where you have one tentacle way, 2 miles further east than the other tentacle, you could have those people voting, they all have to vote at the same place. And so that's the consideration of why we might want to consider asking the board to make these more compact and focus less on maintaining the exact same people in the exact same precinct. The second use of precincts is that the major political parties use them for electing their officers, their county chairs, et cetera, who elect people to be the chair of the Board of Elections. Both of those political parties, to my knowledge, when there is an election, they use those boundaries as of the election until there's another election 4 years later. So we would not be changing that or impacting that until whenever those political parties have those elections, which I believe is a few years from now. I don't know exactly.
Okay, do we, may I?
Sure. You may.
Sorry about that. So what are our deadlines for having to get back to the Board of Elections and tell them what our decisions are And if we ask to see, so that's one question. The second is, and then, will they, send us, maybe, 2 choices or 3 choices to look at one time? Or they won't?
This is the choice. There is no other.
Well, we don't have to accept it. I mean,
There's a larger question of, by the board asking us to approve this, there's an implication that we have some potential say in what the boundaries are.
But they didn't give us 2 or 3.
No, they did not.
They gave us 1.
well, I know they did not, but will they at least offer another choice? And I'm not saying there should be another choice. I'm just saying that, this was just put down here today and here we go.
Yes, B.
So,
The director at the Board of Elections, they're trying to get this passed through their board on February 13th.
okay.
So they
So that's the
want
deadline is,
any
that
for-
they need it before, yeah.
Well, we also need to make sure that we do not object to this at our next council meeting on February 7th.
Okay.
They need to have that information to pass on to their board on the 13th. But I don't foresee them giving us several selections to choose from. I'm sure they'd be happy to answer any specific questions that you have, but
Okay.
as for several choices, I just don't see that happening.
I don't either,
So,
but I have to ask.
Mr. Lambert, do you have a question?
I do, thank you, Madam Chair. Do we know what the polling locations are gonna be for November? Have they already received those, or that would be beneficial to overlay, cause I know we have
I mean,
Spruce is closed. and
Miss
then-
Madam Chairwoman, usually they
Yes,
notify the city, the office of the mayor will receive, notification from the Board of Elections that delineates, these are the locations, but that doesn't come out until right before that election, like they're not, like they ain't planning right now, does that make sense? Like, we're not gonna hear about that right now.
So just to follow up on that, Madam Chair. So the Spruce used to be a polling location, right? So
But it
Spruce has
It
not been
hasn't
a
been
polling
for a long
location
it
time.
wasn't,
for a
yeah,
number of
okay, for
elections.
the last election, okay.
There's been a stable group of 6. There was a issue with Maple having construction for the special August primary. But otherwise, there's been a stable group of 6, which are St. Clarence, the community cabin, the library, John Knox, Maple Elementary, and Clay Road Church of Christ.
Yeah, I just wanna make sure that we didn't have any expected changes, so I mean, from that perspective, the precincts would align, the way they proposed it, they've aligned pretty similar to the way people have been voting before, location-wise. That if you, obviously you'd swap wards, but you could theoretically, the way they've done this, have people voting in the same polling location they've had, for the most part, the way they've extended the boundaries. There's pretty minimal case where you would think they would change up precincts to be at a different polling location.
Madam Chair, I hesitate to make an overarching statement. Not all changes are bad changes, so to speak. What had been 2A, 2B, and what is now gonna be 4B had voted, for example, at Clay Road, Church of Christ. Will 2A, B, and C vote at Maple now, and then 4B, A, and C vote at Clay Road Church of Christ? I don't know. They have not, with the precinct assignments of where people voted, kept only Ward 2 together, or only Ward 4 together. They've put the 2 precincts that are closest here, and the 2 precincts from that one here, and
That's what I'm
in this
saying.
location. So,
Yeah.
I wouldn't expect the boundaries to negatively impact that many people. I think for those that are changes, many of them might see it as a positive, because they're gonna be voting at somewhere that's closer to them than where they, again, using my ward example, there are people who live on Maple Ridge Road, right across from the elementary school, and they go vote at John Knox, and it drives them mad. Or Clay Road Church of Christ or whatever. So, I don't know what the Board of Elections' true appetite for changes are. I suspect, based on what the chairwoman read off, we would have to be very specific in changes we would request, or perhaps even offer a map of what those changes would look like. One of the limiting factors of this is that some of the irregularities you see in these shapes are because when they draw these maps, it's not drawn with just any road here, or you can't just draw it anywhere you want. You have to use census blocks, which are to give you perspective for each of these precincts, they're anywhere from 2 to 8 or so blocks that are within those of this area here or this area here. And so some of those are easily divisible and some of them are awkward. One of the ones that I took a look at some of these, say, okay, can we really improve this or not? 1E in the north central of the city, there's, that's a pretty odd east to west precinct right there. The problem is if you take the far east end of it and go south all the way down the Lorraine Road, you end up with only about 2/3 of the number of people you need. And so you would have to bleed into the next side, and the part that is above 1B right now, you'd think, oh, there's got to be a couple segments in there. There's not. It's that one, and then the entirety of everything south of it is one census block. And so there isn't a cleaner way to do there. Most areas there is a cleaner way if you're willing to move the precinct boundaries more than what they've done, but not everywhere. Sure, I made this less clear. I'm willing to spend some time on this if there is an appetite for it, for folks to see an alternative, to try to show an alternative. If folks are not interested in this, I'm happy to not spend time on this project. But for me personally, looking at Ward 2, more of a focus, I think the 2E proposed precinct is quite a ninja star formation there, and I would perhaps suggest to them modifying that if we were looking to make any modifications or suggestions.
Madam Chair, if I may.
Yes.
So
Council.
2E proposed would be Ward 2, but would be going south of Lorraine then?
So, for example, that one, again, I spent a little more time on with it being my ward. I would have 2C's boundary would go south on Walter Road to Lorraine, and so you just have that. Folks can see.
Yeah.
This is a precinct. Then 2D would continue down Columbia. This is a precinct, and then what remains. It doesn't fix all of it, but it helps eliminate the 1.5 to 2 miles from east to west. There aren't very many folks that live up here. There's none that live
No,
here.
but I'm in agreement to where I had 1D, that was just a cluster over there, that needs to go to 1-2.
Right.
1D is now.
Yeah.
For me, and I'm fine picking up.
Well, it did. So these precincts have to fit within the wards that we adopted.
Yeah.
And so that's why you see this odd shape in the proposed 2E, because they're taking all the new fragments of Ward 2 from other wards and just shoving it in one precinct, because they're trying to leave the other precincts that were in Ward 2 alone.
Right.
And that's a understandable intent, but again, we're drawing this goofy precinct here in 2E to facilitate a map that no longer exists. So.
Another questions?
No, well, I guess the thing is I'd like to take a look at this same thing, but in a bigger scale, so that I could see a little bit more of the detail of the streets, right? Because when we sort of went with the new ward maps, it was because, for example, Councilman Glassburn and I, so there was one street, he had one side, I had the other side. On the very next block, it was this, he had one side and I had one side. So we were trying to avoid the confusion of a neighbor saying, oh my gosh, where do you vote, or, you know, that kind of thing, right? So that, I'd like to look at this blown up a little bit, if there's a way to get a copy of a bigger one, just to know that there's not some kind of crazy thing of like neighbors being confused about where they go to vote. Hey, do you understand what I mean? And then they show up at the wrong place, they're irritated, even though they get the information from the Board of Elections, I get that. They get these postcards, they get information. I don't know, I was reading. Can we get this blown up, do you think, or no?
I mean, yes, there are larger maps and maps you can zoom in on. I mean, the issue that what you're really gonna wanna see is if there's a consideration of making any changes is the census block map to know what's possible, how can the pieces fit together. So like, there's this little, between the proposed 4A and 4B, there's this little square here that is off of Michael, that while all this now is in Ward 4 and eliminated the problem of being different wards, the precincts are in different places. So 4A and 4B don't end up voting at the same location. You'll have non-contiguous portions of Michael voting in different places. Will the board find a way to make 4A and 4B vote in the same place? Probably. I don't know. But the reason that it's there is they're trying to maintain the previous precinct boundary. So they're taking the old part of 2 that went there and keeping that odd boundary from the old 2.
Well, I mean, it's not that I wholly object to this, it's not like I want a whole redo, right? Like scrap this and start over, but I would like to see it in more detail, that's all. But if that's not possible, then I guess it's not.
We would have to contact the Board of Elections for that.
Okay.
And find out, so you'd have to have all of your questions written out for Lee, so she can contact them tomorrow. And get
I
those
just want a
answers for
larger
you.
version of this, I mean, a blown up, like, you get to zoom in when you're on Google Maps, you zoom in, and you can see things in more detail. But if Mr. Glassman suggested I look at a different map, then that's okay.
It can be done on a technical basis. Again, to me, the core question is do we want to engage in this at all? But I'm not the chair of this, so.
Well, I think that, does anyone else have questions? No, well then I'm going to move the Intra-Governmental Relations Committee to not object to this precincts maps as assigned by the Board of Election and to ask for a second.
Second.
All in favor say yes. So the motion passes 3-0. And it completes at 8:24 p.m.
The reason I'm asking
We can get your questions answered.